All right, last call for programs here. Anybody need some? There's some here. I'll go grab more as well. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So today's event is in benefit of Epiphany's Second Mile Appeal. So if you feel so moved, you may place an offering in our gold offering plates. All money will go towards construction and our Second Mile Appeal. Thank you very much. The first piece we're going to hear is a piece by American organist Gordon Young. Thank you all for coming. I'm grateful to see you all here. Thank you. The rest of this performance will be a chronological presentation of some organ works ranging from the mid-Baroque era all the way up to the 20th century. The first composer we'll hear from in this portion of the program is from Dietrich Buxtehude. Buxtehude was a Danish composer of the mid-Baroque era. He was known as an organist as well as a church musician. His father was an organist, so he followed in his footsteps, serving churches in Sweden, Denmark, and then finally his most famous post in Lübeck, Germany. Here at this post in Lübeck, since this town in particular was not governed as strictly as many other places were, and that these organist jobs were government-sanctioned jobs, he actually had a lot of freedom in terms of what he could compose and his ability to do concert tours and develop his career not just as a church musician, but as a concert organist and composer. So this really influenced composers that would come in the later Baroque, such as Handel, Telemann, and most famously, J.S. Bach. Buxtehude famously actually was looked up to by many of these composers, especially Bach. Bach actually walked about 100 miles or so by foot to go study with Buxtehude in Lübeck, Germany. For a couple months here, Bach worked alongside Buxtehude and attended his concerts and learned from him, studying with him as a musician and composer. Upon their time together, Buxtehude actually offered Bach his own job, which was very sought after. So naturally, one would think Bach would do it, but the stipulation was that the new appointee would have to marry Buxtehude's daughter. So Bach, and then also Handel was offered this too, and it was turned down. So Bach walked back jobless, but he had another job to come back to. But Buxtehude in particular was known for his works based on Lutheran hymn tunes. For his work on Lutheran hymn tunes, as well as his virtuoso works for keyboard, as well as for voice. He has a little bit of chamber music, but unfortunately the manuscripts for those have been lost, so there's not really much published work in that regard. So the piece you'll hear, the Prelude, Fugue, and Chaconne in C major, again, is a sectioned work in 3 parts. The Prelude includes a free, almost improvisatory pedal introduction. This also introduces the musical material you'll hear in the Fugue, the middle portion of the piece. And then finally we end on a Chaconne, which is a Baroque musical form that features a repeated bass figure, perfect for the pedals of our organ. In this particular piece, on a grander scale, you can listen for a speech-like narrative. We hear at the beginning a very assertive musical introduction. Perhaps this is our speaker introducing himself as a qualified speaker. And then there's a joke. Listen for that joke. It's pretty obvious where it comes, I think. See if you can point it out. And then we have a little bit more dissertation, and then the fugue seems like it's going to come to an end, but then there's a more free section followed by a sudden minor key change. So this perhaps is a heckler or a dramatic dissenter. And then our speaker regains his momentum, and the chaconne builds to an assertive ending in C major. So this is Buxtehude's Prelude, Fugue, and Chaconne in C. Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from perhaps the most well-known composer on this program, Johann Sebastian Bach. So, taking what Buxtehude had done with Lutheran hymn tunes and virtuoso works for especially the keyboard, Bach really took this to the next level, demonstrating mastery not only of composition, but he was also a great performer, combined with his deep spirituality, which really comes through in his settings of hymn tunes and how he reflects the words in those works. Bach himself was very highly regarded during his time, but only about 10% of his publications, which is a very vast amount still, was published during his lifetime. It was actually Felix Mendelssohn, who you'll hear from later on this program, who played a key part in reviving Bach's music, at which point Bach's music then came into the public eye much more. Today you'll be hearing 3 arrangements of hymn tunes by Bach. The first one we have is Wach it auf, which translates to wake up, the voice is calling us. This is a setting of a parable from the Bible, from the Gospel of Matthew. It's a chorale prelude based on what we in our church, in our hymnal, is called Sleepers Awake. It's an arrangement of a chorale cantata, meaning it's an arrangement for organ of a work that was originally for strings, winds, and voices. So here on what's called the great division of the organ, the lower part, we hear on a solo trumpet stop the melody. And then up here on the swell division, the top keyboard, this is the part that'll probably get stuck in your head, which is actually, it's not the melody of the tune, it's just an accompaniment. So 2 very different sounds going on there. And then the feet play the string bass and cello part. So between all of this, we get the full sound of an ensemble on one instrument. The middle piece you'll hear is a much more solemn hymn tune, Ich ruf zu dir, I call to you, Lord Jesus Christ. In this one, through Bach's setting of it, you really get the sense of longing and despair and mourning that the words of this tune call for. Those words are actually on the back of the program, too, if you'd like to take a look. For this one, the chorale melody, the part that would be sung, is in the right hand, this time not on a trumpet, but on an oboe up here. And at the beginning of the piece, we see much more embellishment on the melody, things like ornaments. But then, about 2/3 of the way through, we see the words pure faith or straight path. And at that point, it looks like Bach is really shaping his musical work off of the words to the text, or the words to the hymn, because all of a sudden we just see very simple iterations of the hymn tune. So it's in that way that a lot of times he really respected the words that were going on, which is really interesting. And then we see the left hand plays just a moving rolled chord accompaniment, and then the pedal plays a steady heartbeat, perhaps symbolizing the passing of time. And then finally, we have a very joyful New Year's hymn tune, In Thee is Gladness. So this chorale prelude, the hymn is actually very hidden. If you looked at the music, you could actually find it, but it's very hard to hear from listening. So the main thing to listen for here is just this idea of short, 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 long. Those are actually the first 4 notes of the melody, and it gets repeated over and over in both hands and in the pedals. Listen for that here. And then it has a very dance-like character, to perhaps a dance to celebrate the new year. So here we have 3 hymn settings by J.S. Bach. Next up, we'll be hearing from composer Felix Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn was also German, coming a little bit later in time than Bach. Was a pianist, composer, and also organist of the early Romantic period. What set him apart from other Romantic composers, such as Chopin or Liszt, is that Mendelssohn was not interested in furthering the technicality or exploring harmonically with chords and notes and scales the same way those other composers did. Mendelssohn was actually more focused on reinvigorating some of the works that came before him, those of Beethoven, Mozart, and especially Bach. Like I mentioned before, Mendelssohn actually helped revive some of Bach's music through a performance in 1829 of St. Matthew's Passion. Mendelssohn himself was also a skilled performer and conductor, and his many tours of Europe sparked the interest and sometimes commission for many of his pieces. The piece you'll be hearing today, his second organ sonata, is one of 6. These 6 organ sonatas were commissioned as a set of church voluntaries or church preludes to be played in England. Mendelssohn himself never actually performed these due to the fact that the English organs that he would have performed on were not up to his standards. So they were actually performed by other organists, but never by him. These sonatas were well received by the public in Europe and were often published and performed, just never by Mendelssohn. So here in this one, we'll be listening for Bach-like harmonies with a touch of improvisational style. Mendelssohn himself was a really great improviser, as many of these Baroque and classical and Romantic composers were. That was an important part of their musical upbringing. So listen for that here. And then this piece is called a sonata, which a sonata usually entails a 3-part form: a medium to fast movement, then a slow movement, and then a fast movement at the end. But these 6 sonatas are really a sonata in name only, being that they're just a collection of kind of musical moments for the organ. It flows seamlessly throughout, and there's arguably 4 parts, very, very straying from what was known to be a sonata at the time. Perhaps in a tribute to the great J.S. Bach, we end here with a fugue in the final movement. So this is Mendelssohn's second organ sonata. Thank you. That was Mendelssohn's Second Sonata. Before we go on with our last piece, there's a lot of people I need to thank. First off, everybody who works here with me at Epiphany, including our praise band musicians, our sound guy, Josh Beatty-Bar back there, our tech engineer, Roy, who's making this all happen. He's done such an excellent job. Thank you, Roy. It's really been helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you to our two wonderful pastors, Ron and Anna. I feel like the whole time I've been here, I've felt nothing but absolutely welcomed. That goes for the Epiphany community and congregation, too. And I've grown so much, as not just as a musician with taking on the organ and everything, but as a person, too, and I think that's most important. So I really feel like I work in a place where I can grow personally as well as professionally. So I really appreciate it. And then my wonderful teacher who attended at my recital last night, Dr. David Christensen. He is the Minister of Music at St. Andrews Park Ridge, and then he teaches organ at Elmhurst University and Concordia University. Without him, none of this would have been able to happen. He's such a wonderful teacher and mentor and has shared his excitement for church music and organ repertoire with me, and I really owe him a lot. So, David, if you watch this, thank you very much. And then also our past director of music, Chris Sandrock. I'm hoping she's watching live or will watch this later. Without Chris, none of this really would have happened. She gave me the chance to try out the organ and was very open-minded with all of my ideas about working the organ into the service, and she connected me with Dr. Christensen, so I really owe a lot to her, and she taught me a lot in stepping into the director of music role. So I have all those people to thank, and I'm very grateful. Thank you guys so much. We are going to wrap up today with a piece by French composer Louis Vierne. So Vierne, coming a little bit later than Mendelssohn, was a composer in the French Romantic style. So the French actually had pretty much their own organ school. Throughout time, there are several different generations of French organists. So Vierne studied with organists César Franck and Charles Widor. Each of them are very well-known organists and composers of their own right. And then Vierne's pupils included Jean Langlais, an organist, and then arguably the most well-known French organist and composer, Olivier Messiaen. Vierne was most well-known for his tenure at the Notre Dame Cathedral from 1930 until his death in 1937. His musical output mostly focused on the organ, especially developing what's called the organ symphony, these long, extended symphonic works for organ. They're really worth checking out. Interestingly about Vierne, he was born mostly blind, composing mostly throughout his life with a crayon and an easel. I'm not sure why he chose organ as a mostly blind individual, but obviously he made it happen. And then, as it is with many of these composers, it's either a sad story or a funny story, or in this case, both. He unfortunately passed away mid-recital at Notre Dame. He was giving his 1750th recital as the organist at Notre Dame, and upon completing the written portion of the recital, he was going to give an improvisation and suffered a stroke and landed on the pedals of the keyboard. So goes the story as told by his student who is up there on stage with him. So Vierne, a wonderful composer, unfortunately met an untimely demise. The piece you will hear is perhaps his most well-known, the Caroline de Westminster. This is part of Vierne's 24 fantasy pieces, published in 1927. This one is definitely the most famous of those 24. This is based on the chimes played at the Westminster Palace in England. If you're not quite sure what that melody is, you'll recognize it once it comes in. And in the typical French Romantic style, it features shifting dramatic scales and chords, often very abruptly and dramatically. So really listen for that Westminster chime theme. It's pretty hard to miss. It's played throughout the entire piece. We have a repeated rhythmic accompaniment going between the two hands, and then we have lots of interplay between the hands and feet, almost like a full ensemble being played at the organ. The musical voices are interacting with each other. This will be the last piece I'll play today. Thank you all very much for coming out. Super grateful to see everybody here. This is Vierne's Caroline de Westminster. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for coming out. If anybody has any questions or wants to take it for a spin, let me know. Looks like Pastor Ron's here and maybe wants to say.
Just say something real quick. Those of you here at Epiphany, I know, are incredibly proud of Clay, as I am. I feel like I'm a beaming father, friend, brother, at what Clay has been able to do here. I want to make sure that, and I'm proud not only of Clay, but I'm proud of this congregation, because we have given the church another church musician. And I want to tell you how that happened. We all know that Clay's a great piano player. He was a jazz pianist in college, and when we hired Chris, and we were looking for an organist, and Clay said, "Well, I know you're going to be hiring an organist, but I think I can probably make do for a while you find someone." And and we said, "Oh, okay." Well, he progressed, and then finally, Chris and I started talking about, maybe we ought to keep Clay around playing the organ, and one of the reasons I say I'm proud of Epiphany is that one of the deals we made was, if he wants to become an organist, we'll pay for his lessons. And so we have, he talked about his professor, Dr. David Christensen, wonderful organist himself, and obviously a really, really good teacher. And so we've been supporting that, supporting Clay in that, and for that, I thank you. I remember we were sitting when Chris and I, after a few months, we kind of looked at each other and said, maybe we ought to give him the job permanently. And I said, well, let's talk to Dr. Christensen first. And so we sat right there, and Clay was with us, and Chris and Dr. Christensen. And I looked Dr. Christensen in the eye, and I said, do you think he can do it? We're kind of taking a chance on somebody who has no experience. Well, I turned out to be pretty good, huh? That was a pretty good decision, wasn't it? So, Clay, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you put into it. It's just amazing to see you grow musically, but also you're a wonderful person to have around. And I am so happy. I'm thankful to Epiphany that through your gifts and through your moral support. I know I see so many people making comments and thanking you for that. Thank you for supporting Clay and for giving the gift of another organist to the church. There are not many young people going into learning to become organists, and so I'm so proud. So thank you, Clay.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, guys. That is it.